Today we're going to be changing the brake wire on a Tfk Joggster Twist. In this case, the brake wire inside has begun to rust at the top end and bottom end of the overall brake wire. It is still possible to move the brake wire inside, and for that reason we do not need to switch out the housing, but only the brake wire that is inside. We are going to leave the housing as it is. In cases where the inside wire has rusted so much that you can't move it at all, it will also be necessary to change out the housing, in which case you need to cut a length of housing, the same length as the brake wire that is already on the stroller, and connect it to the stroller using these strips you can get at an electrical supply store or Home Depot or something if you're in the US. If you would like the brake wire to run down through this side part of the frame, then it is important to attach the two brake wires to each other using perhaps a length of wire. That's how I often do it, so that you can pull one out and at the same time pull the other down through. We won't be doing this today, but perhaps I'll make a video in the future showing how to do so. What we need to begin with then is removing the brake wire from this top mechanism, and in order to do this we are going to take out this screw. There is a nut underneath. As you pull this out like this, you can flip it over and remove the cylinder. Sometimes this is a small ball instead. And then you can unscrew the adjustment screw. And pull this through the side slit, which is here. On newer models, this system is a little bit different, and you will need to also remove a screw here. There will be a ball at this end, and you will need to pull it straight out from this plastic part. Okay, then where the brake wire connects at the bottom is inside this central housing area here. There are going to be 4 small screws, very small, positioned here, here, and on the bottom. You need to remove all 4 of them. And then you might need to use a flathead screwdriver or something, but you need to pull this off like this. Also, the wheels attach to the central mechanism on the side here, so you already need to have pulled these off or unscrewed them off. What I have already done now with the brake wire is to clip the top end, which I previously showed you, and pull it all the way out of the housing. The brake wire then goes through these 2 black parts and this central spring and attaches to the other side with another small locking end. So we're going to take all of this apart as such. Since we are going to be reusing the housing, you want to start out with taking some WD-40 and using the small straw attachment, spray a bit inside, wait for it to run out through the bottom, and do this several times until you're satisfied that it's well lubricated inside. And you want to take your new brake line. I always use ones that are stainless steel, or in this case also Teflon coated. If you think of a non-stick pan, this provides a lot of easy movement inside the brake wire. You want to uncoil it. There was actually another part on the end of this brake wire, and I have clipped it off. So you want to just leave the cylindrical attachment end. And we want to take the clipped side, and being careful that this all goes inside the housing and that the small strands do not unravel themselves, we want to slide it down within the brake line housing. We now want to reattach this part of the brake wire to the top handle. If this had been the newer type of brakes, then I would not have threaded this directly into the housing, but I would have taken this part first from the backside through here, through the adjustment screw, and then into the housing. Because the newer type does not have the slit, which makes it easier afterwards to fit this through. In this case, though, we are going to replace the adjustment screw here. And then screw it in place so that the nut is all the way up against the head of the adjustment screw, and then as far in as possible. This means that we can then use the adjustment screw later to tighten the overall job. This needs to go also through this red part. And then we take the handle, and the cylinder is going to fit right into this little hole, like this. And you pull it downwards. There is a spring here. You need to flip this over, and then you need to have these little feet on the spring as far down like this as possible, because they fit onto a plastic ledge at the bottom here inside. And we want to fit all of this inside and slide it into place. Then we can replace the screw, and there is a nut underneath that we will screw in tight. When this spring is properly positioned, the feet are properly positioned against the leg, this should more or less snap back once the whole mechanism is there. Put back together. Okay, now we're going to move back to the lower mechanism, and what you need to start with is placing the spring onto the brake line. And then, normally, if this was using original parts from TFK, there would be a small cylinder or ball that would fit onto the perfectly measured brake line, which you could fit here. But since we are using generic parts, we are going to have to tie this off ourselves. You can slide this wire through this slit and also through this slit on the inside. Like this, and like this. And now what we are going to do is use this internal wall to tie off something such that it comes in contact with this internal wall and provides us with the same sort of stability that we would have had there been a cylinder or a ball fitting into this recess. This part here fits on as such that the end of this brake line just goes into the hole there, and the wire comes straight down through here. In order to create enough resistance, enough tension in the spring, I like to start this slightly up while I'm measuring to about halfway down across, and then I know that if I can now put something right there, it will create enough tension in the spring. It's always better to have your brake line slightly too long than too short, because then you can always tie extra knots and add extra things to create resistance. In this case, in order to tie it off, I'm using the same technique that I did in the video on Boogaboo brake lines, in which I take an end for a brake line and thread this brake wire through the small hole. My goal will then be to tie a knot such that it fits inside the cylinder and is as close as possible to this whole area. I very often with TFKs also use a, instead of this, use a screw that has a hole going in through the side, and then you can put a nut on top and tighten it, but I don't have one at the moment. Okay, now I'm pulling this knot that I'm tying tighter, as tight as I can. Then I need pinch it. And then I need to pull it inside the rest of this brake part. I'm going to do this by taking the hollow of my pliers and placing it around the wire below the stopper, and then pulling. Then we're going to clip off the extra brake line as close to the knot as possible. Then we're going to fit the spring in the center like this and put the mechanism back in place. It's a good idea before you screw everything back together to test the brakes and see that they're tight enough. If not, you can add a second knot, but be sure that you get it as close as possible here so that the mechanism can still tighten. If it's too close to here, then it won't work. So put your shielding back on top of this mechanism and reclip those, and then test with the brake on top. And in this case, worked fine. That means that I can just replace these 4 screws and I'm finished. Thank you.